U.S. Central Command forces conducted strikes on 14 Iran-backed Houthi missiles that were loaded to be fired in Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. I'd like to bring into the conversation now national security analyst, retired Marines intelligence officer Hal Kempfer. Hal, another strike against Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, this is the fourth one after Houthis attacked a U.S. ship earlier this week.
Uh, well, they've been attacking almost one a day since we did our strikes. They get out one shot a day. This most recent one, they actually hit it with a drone, with an unmanned aerial vehicle. It was a one-way drone that went into the ship. They've also been using ballistic missiles, but there's something that we've been doing is we've been picking up when they put those missiles on the launchers. And once we see them pull the missiles out, they're getting ready to put them on the launchers, we launch a strike mission. Now, this one today looked like mostly Tomahawk missiles, from what I can ascertain. May have been all Tomahawk missiles. There was something about the British may have done something with the strike mission. It's tough for the British to do anything with a aerial strike mission, since they have to fly all the way out of Cyprus, which is a very long mission, a lot of aerial in-flight aerial refueling. So I'm not quite sure if that's correct. This one looks like mostly Tomahawk missiles. They're right off the coast. They're fast. They're darn near impossible to stop once they're going in. And they hit those sites and they took out 14 missiles. And it's difficult to say exactly what's going on, but it's likely that there are missiles and drones that are held in bunkers or caves or something where they have them in such a way that they weren't hit the first time. So as they pull these things out of wherever they had them safely stored and they're exposed, we pick up on that with our intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance systems, and we immediately put together a quick response target mission, and that's what happened there. Now, this one that happened today was right after the Houthis were put on the specially designated global terrorist list. That's still not as legally powerful as what they were on before under the Trump administration, which is a foreign terrorist organization. But it has put them into the terrorist realm, which gives us a lot more freedom of movement in terms of going after finances and specifically blocking Houthis from traveling around. I should say those traveling around who are part of this Houthi terrorist organization from traveling around the world, from doing things in a business context, if you will, but especially the financial side, blocking money and other things that could go to them, and also taking actions against those who support the Houthis, other countries, and using that as a justification for various different instruments to basically curtail their activities. So there is some teeth to this. Obviously, the discussion is, will they raise it all the way up to the foreign terrorist organization status? There's a lot of discussion that that's in the works, but we haven't seen anything yet. And I've heard it kind of go back and forth. Originally, I said this was the first step to going to FTO. Then more recently, I've heard, well, we're looking at that. I'm not quite sure where that's going to end up, but that's seems to be where they're going.
Al, I do want to continue to talk about all of the tension that's escalating in the Middle East. This week, big news: Iran hitting Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan with missiles. Pakistan condemning the strike, calling it, quote, unprovoked violation of its airspace and saying it will retaliate. My question is, was it unprovoked, and what is that retaliation going to look like?
I don't know what the retaliation is going to be. That's a really big question. And, Pakistan's got a very substantial military capability. I would also mention that Pakistan is a nuclear nation. I'm not saying they could use nuclear weapons against Iran, but I am saying that they are not some a country to be trifled with in terms of their military power. Now, what they hit was they hit it's a Baluchi group, if you will, Sunni, not Shiite. The predominant religion in Iran and the theocracy in Iran is Shiite. They said they hit a target in the Baluchistan province area of Pakistan. What Pakistan's saying is what they hit killed 2 children, injured 3 other children, and that was all that was hurt. And that group hadn't really done anything, done any sort of targeting or operations in Iran for at least a couple 3 years, from what I understand. And then, of course, they hit a site up in the Kurdish areas of Syria and Iraq. One in Erbil, they said that was uh, a Mossad spy base or something. Of course, the Iraqis have denied that that was anything like that. And then there was a another what they said terrorist target that they hit in Syria that happened to be in the Kurdish area. And in both, and particularly with Pakistan, but also Iraq, this violation of their sovereignty and sovereign airspace has really caused a diplomatic furor with Iran as far as that goes. And what it appears is this is simply something for a domestic audience in Iran. As you may recall, they had that terrorist attack that ISIS has claimed responsibility for, hitting Soleimani's memorial service. Biggest terrorist attack in Iran, I think, that they've ever had historically in terms of loss of life and certainly injuries. And this is just terribly embarrassed the security services. It's embarrassed the administration, the theocratic ruling administration, if you will. It's embarrassed the Revolutionary Guards Corps. So they have elections coming up, and so they've just felt, the assessment is that they just felt they needed to lash out to show that they were still a very potent security military force. And as one expert said, it's as if they went to they decided to hit things on the list of the usual suspects, which was to go back and hit things that had absolutely nothing to do with that attack, and then try to somehow construe it as if this was a counterterrorism thing, and then reminding everybody there was a terrorist action, when in fact these are completely remotely distant things. They have nothing to do with each other. But that's what the Iranians are doing right now, and I think it does show a fundamental weakness in the Iranian regime, that they felt that they had to do something like this. Now, this is going to have ramifications with Pakistan for quite some time. And I think it's going to have greater ramifications over time with Iraq. Even though Iraq, the ruling parties or parties, I should say, are predominantly Shiite. The country is predominantly Shiite, about 60%. No country likes to have its sovereignty violated in a way like this, and that's going to be a real thorn diplomatically in the side of Iraqi Iranian relations at an interesting time when the head of the prime minister in Iraq was talking about maybe it's time that the U.S. and the coalition forces leave. I don't know if that's just rhetoric or if there's going to be something more substantive to that, but it appeared that Iran was having a lot of sway. Then they did this, and I think they may have kind of pulled the rug out from under themselves a little bit in terms of what they were trying to accomplish.
And not just with Iraq, you did mention Pakistan. And the minister there did say that it was even more concerning that this happened with that strike, despite the existence of several channels of communication between Pakistan and Iran. So it just seems that Iran is isolating and almost breaking down all of those diplomatic talks that it's been able to achieve with all of its neighbors in the Middle East.
It was, I have to say, diplomatically, it was a very counterproductive move. Pakistan immediately recalled their ambassador. That's a pretty significant move on their end, and just the geography is that they are neighboring countries. You have the Baluchistan province borders Iran, and of all the one of the areas in Iran that is most restive, shall we say, is the Baluchistan area. The security forces, when all the protests are going on, there were reports coming out that the security forces were rather draconian in terms of how they're handling Baluchi minority groups in that area. So there was already some pre-existing fervor, if you will, anti-regime fervor that was in that area. Then this happens, and they target this group right across the border, the group that has ties in Iran. It just politically, diplomatically, it was almost like a petulant child lashing out. And of course, the politics are all internal, which is they have to show that they can do something. And this is all they can do. And the interesting thing is they have to show they can do something, but they don't want to do something that's going to trigger a direct confrontation with the United States or direct confrontation with Israel. So they kind of do this roundabout series of attacks. And and they can claim that they did do something within their supporters. They go, see how strong Iran is; it's able to do this. But the regime is still pretty much disassociated with the vast body politic, if you will, in Iran. And one of the problems they're having there is this upcoming election may have historically low voter turnout because people are just so frustrated with the regime.
All right, Hal, I do want to move on. I mean, there's so many topics that we can discuss here when it comes to the Middle East, especially with these latest Iranian attacks. But let's get back to almost this catalyst from right in the beginning, started October 7th, because Israel and the Hamas war, it's kind of what has started this entire turmoil in that region. We did get news today that medicine is en route to hostages in Gaza. What does this process look like? How long is it going to take for that medicine to actually reach hostages there?
You know, it's interesting. I was watching that today. There was some video of trucks coming in, and they said there was medicine coming in. I think that was medicine for Palestinian civilians that are in the Gaza Strip. That was aid that was coming across the border. And everything I've seen is that the medicine for the 40 some hostages that are on medication, Israeli hostages on medication, that is still en route, that has not gotten in there. And as near as I can figure out, and I was kind of looking at this today, it appears it goes in there, and then at some point it gets handed off to Hamas, and Hamas actually has to disseminate that medication to the various hostages. That to me is a very imperfect system. A better system, a more valid system, would be if they'd actually let the International Red Cross visit the hostages, interface with them as they had promised to do during the first hostage and prisoner exchange that they never followed through on. You know, if Hamas would let the International Red Cross go in there and actually provide this directly to the hostages themselves, I would feel a greater deal of assurance. But right now, when it does come in, it crosses the border. And once it crosses the border, it's pretty much under the control of Hamas, and they'll decide where that medication goes. I'm just hoping that it does get to those who need it, which are those hostages. But there's also associated with this part of the deal was that a lot of needed medications for Palestinian civilians is also coming in. And it does appear like the first loads of that may have already crossed the border today.
Al, is this an optimistic sign that diplomatic talks in the region they're going in a positive direction because we're getting that medicine in? It's an imperfect system, albeit, but still some progress to be made.
You know, at some levels, at least there's talking. You know, this is one of those things. Egypt has stepped in today. They were very vocal about how they want to be more engaged in the negotiations. Of course, this one was working with the Qataris, and those were Qatari planes that actually flew into Egypt with the medications that are going for the hostages and for the Palestinian civilians as well. So that's somewhat hopeful. There was also a lot of discussion yesterday and before that they say there's been some real progress in it. Maybe another hostage for prisoner exchange deal may or may not be accompanied by a ceasefire. But then again, these things pop up, and we've heard this sort of optimistic talk before. And I definitely say, do not hold your breath when you hear this stuff because sometimes it happens, and frankly, only one time it actually did happen. Although they did extend it well beyond the initial period, so that was some progress there. But the other side of that is, they videotaped three hostages, and then they killed two of the Israeli hostages that were in the videotapes. Now, I believe they blamed an Israeli airstrike. They always do blame an Israeli airstrike when hostages end up getting killed, and of course, it takes a while because eventually they'd have to find, the remains of the hostages and be able to do something forensically to figure out what exactly happened. But they're basically everything coming out there says that the hostages are in a very tenuous situation every day, and Hamas is not above executing hostages. So there's room for optimism, but on the other hand, everyone knows the clock's ticking, and they want to get the hostages out because the longer they're there, the lower and lower their chances of survival.
All right, Hal, this is a live lookout in Jerusalem for all our viewers.